Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Newsroom. I'm your host, Khalid. But today is Friday, the 12th of July, 2024, and this is the lineup for today's show. We'll begin with the United Nations SDG Report 2024 that has recently been released by the United Nations Secretary General. What are the important modalities of it? What has been achieved? What has not been achieved is what we will discuss in our first segment. Then we will be talking about the talks with the IMF, and of course, there is a new media talk that our finance minister has had, in which he talks about the IMF and what are the possibilities of having that EFF signed in the next couple of weeks. Then we are going to talk about at least 65 stranded whales that have died in Scotland, and they have been stranded. This is what a lot of people say, that they normally go in groups, and that is why maybe one or more might have been stranded and the other have followed suit. Finally, we'll be talking about the first ever planet that has been discovered with an ocean. Now, this planet is quite far away, but the similarities as far as Earth is concerned are very much there, whether it be the presence of water, whether it be the presence of nitrogen and others. This is going to be our final story. Let's begin with our first segment, and that concerns the UN SDG Report 2024. What are the important points of this report? What has been done as far as the SDG 2030 goals are concerned? To talk more about this, we've been joined by Yongyi. She is the chief of the SDG monitoring section at the Statistics Division of the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs. Thank you very much, Yongyi, to have joined us. Pleasure to have you in this exclusive on PTV World. I'd like you to begin with telling a little bit about yourself, because a lot of people don't know what UN Stats is all about, and what is the role that you have as far as the SDG reports are concerned. I understand you've been preparing and overheading these reports for quite a number of years. What are the basic objectives of your organization in this regard?
Thank you so much, Omar. Thank you for having me. The United Nations Statistical Division is a part of the UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs, which is the development pillar of the United Nations. So the UN Statistical Division is committed to the advancement of the global statistical system. So we compile and disseminate global statistical information, such as economic statistics, GDP, trade statistics, environment statistics, social statistics. We also develop standards and norms for statistical activities and support countries' effort to strengthen their national statistical system. So we facilitate the coordination of international statistical activities and support the function of the United Nations Statistical Commissions, which is the apex entity of the global statistical system. So I have been doing the SDG report since 2015. So this is 2024 report will be our ninth global SDG report.
All right, wonderful. Yongyi, what is the importance of the SDGs? We talk a lot about these, the different 17 important goals that the SDGs have. What are these SDGs? How important are they? And how important is it also that they be monitored properly?
So the Sustainable Development Goals are a collection of 17 interlinked global goals designed to be the blueprint to achieve a better and more sustainable future for all by 2030. These goals are intended to address a wide range of issues such as poverty, inequality, climate change, environmental degradation, peace, and justice. It was adopted by all 193 UN member states in July 2015. The SDG provide a very comprehensive development framework for addressing the most pressing global challenges. So they're universal, applying to all countries, regardless of their level of development. So proper monitoring is very critical in the implementation of the SDG. First, it helps tracking the progress. So proper monitoring is essential for tracking progress towards achieving the SDGs. So without accurate and timely data, it's very difficult to assess whether the goals are being met or where additional effort are needed. And secondly, it can inform decision making. Reliable and data and monitoring help policymakers make informed decisions. It helps identify gaps, challenges, and emerging issues that may hinder progress, also allowing for timely interventions and adjustment to strategy. It helps allocate resources effectively and implement policies that are not likely to have a positive, that are most likely, to have a positive impact. And also provide transparency and accountability. So monitoring ensures transparency and accountability by making information available to the public and allow stakeholders to hold the governments and other actors accountable for their commitments and actions. And I think last but not least, it also brings awareness and foster collaborations. Through monitoring, people are aware what the countries or the world has been doing in terms of the progress, and foster collaboration and knowledge sharing among countries, organizations, and also different communities, leading to more effective and coordinated efforts.
All right. The recently released SDG report, let's talk a little bit about that, 2024. It finds that only 17% of the SDG targets have been achieved, are on track. Nearly half are showing minimal or moderate progress, and progress on over 1/3 has been stalled or has even regressed. What have been the other important findings of this recently released SDG report 2024? Although it highlights what are the positives, but it also highlights what are the negatives as far as the different SDG goals are concerned.
Yeah, this is a very sobering picture. So the past year, the world has witnessed unprecedented challenges that have strained our global commitments. And like under goal 1, we see additional 23 million people lived in extreme poverty in 2022 compared to 2019. And over 100 million more suffered from hunger in 2022 compared to 2019. The global health progress slowed since 2015 with mixed improvements in health targets. The COVID-19 pandemic has ravaged the global health, undoing nearly 10 years of progress in improving life expectancies. Currently, I think the life expectancy is reduced by about 1.7 years. Education also remains threatened, as many countries see declines in student math and reading skills, and 1 in 5 young people not in employment, education, or trainings. So we also see the highest number of refugee and forcibly displaced people ever recorded, which is a staggering 120 million individuals. This is compared like the 80 million just 4 years ago. Our planet's health continues to deteriorate at alarming rate. 2023 marked the warmest year on record, pushed us very closely to that 1.5 degree threshold of the Paris Agreement. Biodiversity continues to decline. The economic landscape of developing countries is particularly concerning. For the first time this century, per capita GDP growth in half the world's most vulnerable country lags behind that of advanced economies. This trend threatens to reverse decades of progress towards income equality among nations. So I know I shared a lot of very concerning news, but among these challenges, we have seen remarked progress that should inspire our continued effort. So the report also highlights some encouraging advancements. So over the past 3 decades, increased access to life-saving HIV treatment has averted close to 21 million AIDS-related deaths. In education, girls have achieved parity and even surpassed boys in completing school at all levels in most regions. The digital divide is narrowing, with 2/3 of the world's population now having access to the internet, which is nearly 70% more than in 2015. And the child mortality rate has reduced by more than 50% since 2000. So this is a very encouraging news that keeps us going. So we just have to learn from the lessons of this positive development.
All right. Yongyi, I'd also like to add to some of the issues that the SDG Report 2024 has highlighted. It talks about systemic deficiencies, inequality in the global economic and financial system. It talks about biodiversity loss that is accelerating. It talks about progress towards gender equality that has remained disappointing. It talks about conflicts in Ukraine, Gaza, Sudan, and beyond that have left an unprecedented 120 million, that, as you yourself said, forcibly displaced people worldwide. In this bleak situation, why has the world, in your point of view, this is a slightly out of context question, but why has the world stopped caring? Because, this is what the SDG goals is all about, to bring the world together, to work together for the achievement of these important goals.
I think it's not the word stop caring. It's I just say in the early years of the 2030 agenda, from 2015 to 2019, progress in key indicator was slow but steady. Then the global challenge intensified after 2020. We are aware of that, the COVID-19 pandemic, the escalating conflicts, the geopolitical tensions, the climate change impacts, and the systematic economic shortcomings also have endangered the SDGs, disproportionately affecting the developing countries and also the most vulnerable populations worldwide. The shrinking fiscal space basically has curbed many of the countries' capacity to address these shortfalls. And currently, the debt level remains unprecedentedly high for many of the low-income countries, and there are many of them in debt stress already, and the annual SDG investment gap for developing countries currently stands at $4 trillion.
All right. Yongyi, Pakistan has been extremely affected by climate change. So I would like to ask a Pakistan-specific question. Climate change is one of the 5 major goals that have been discussed in the SDG Report 2024. What are the major concerns regarding climate change? You know as well that Antonio Guterres was in Pakistan. He saw the effects that the floods in 2022 had on Pakistan and all the other effects that climate change is having on Pakistan as well. What are the major concerns as far as this report is concerned regarding climate change?
Regarding to climate change, first we have the record-breaking temperature. As I mentioned, the 2023 was confirmed as the hottest year on record, with the global temperature soaring to approximately 1.45 degrees above the pre-industrial level. The 10 warmest year in the 170 years with records have all happened during the last decade. Greenhouse gas emissions, the global greenhouse gas emission reached a new record of 57 gigatons of CO2 equivalent in 2022. About 2/3 of this emission is from fossil fuel combustion and industry process. So keeping warming to the 1.5 target based on the Paris Agreement call for a 42% reduction in greenhouse gas emission. But current national policy put the world on track for 3 degrees warming. Some good news on climate. Climate finance is very critical in backing global mitigation and adaptation efforts. Developed country committed to mobilize 100 billion annually in climate finance for developing country by 2022 and through 2025. This commitment for developing country was met for the first time in 2022, reaching $160 billion. However, it's estimated nearly $6 trillion is needed for developing countries' climate action plan by 2030. Another concerning factor is fossil fuel subsidy. Fossil fuel subsidy hit a record high of 1.53 trillion in 2022, mainly due to rising energy prices.
All right, Yongyi, You talked about amongst all of these, reservations that the SDG report has, there are some positives that have also been recorded, and you've highlighted some of them, like reductions in child mortality, in HIV infections, the cost of remittances, improvements in access to water, sanitation, energy, and mobile broadband. Under the circumstances that the world is, facing, how has progress been made in these areas?
So progress in various SDG areas can be attributed to a combination of targeted interventions, international cooperation, technological advancement, and policy change. For example, I mentioned the child mortality, the under 5 child mortality reduced by 51% between 2000 and 2023. This is due to a couple of factors. First, is healthcare improvements. Increased access to health care service, including maternal and child health service, vaccinations, prenatal care has significantly reduced child mortality rates. Nutrition programs enhance the nutrition through programs that provide better access to healthy food for mothers and children has improved overall child health and reduced mortality. Sanitation and clean water. Investments in clean water and sanitation facilities have decreased the incidence of waterborne diseases, which are the major contributor to the child mortality. And thirdly, the education for mothers on health practice and child care also improved early childhood health and survival rates. In terms of like increased access to renewable energy and electricity, and there's many renewable energy projects. Investment in this renewable energy resources such as solar, wind, hydropower has increased dramatically. So which have improved access to affordable and sustainable energies in many regions. And infrastructure development, the expansion of energy infrastructure, including the grids and off-grid solution, has brought electricity to remote and underserved areas. A lot of countries designed the policy initiative and the incentive promote energy access, efficiency, and renewable energies adaptation have driving the progress. And in addition, there's international support, both in terms of financial and technical support. So in general, progress in SDG areas is a result of coordinated effort by the governments, international organizations, civil society, and the private sector. They leverage the data, innovation, targeted intervention to address these challenges.
All right, Yongyi, some of the SDGs are under review during an ongoing United Nations high-level political forum that is happening as we speak. Why are these SDGs under review, and what are those SDGs that are under review?
So the SDG under review typically refer to the specific goals that have been examined in depth during particular year's UN high-level political forum on sustainable development. Because the high-level political forum is the main United Nations platform for follow-up and review of the 2030 agenda under the 17 goals. So each year, a subset of the 17 goals is selected for in-depth review alongside Goal 17, which is a partnership for the goals, which is reviewed annually. The specific goals under review for this year is Goal 1 on ending poverty, Goal 2, ending hunger, Goal 3 on combating climate change, Goal 16 on promoting peaceful and inclusive society, and also Goal 17 on partnerships.
All right. Also, this year's Summit of the Future that is going to happen later in the year will provide a vital opportunity, will also pave the way for further breakthroughs as far as the financing for developing countries and the Development Conference and the World Social Summit is concerned that is going to happen next year, that is in 2025. What are the hopes attached to the Summit of the Future in September during the United Nations General Assembly that is going to happen at the same time?
The Summit of the Future is a high-level event that gathers the world leaders to establish a new international consensus on creating a better present and safeguarding the future. This high-level event will bring together the UN member states, UN agencies, non-government organizations, civil society organizations, academic institutions, and the private sector, and particular youth under the theme, the Summit of the Future, multilateral solution for a better tomorrow. I think it aims to forge a new global consensus on what our future should look like and what we can do today to secure it. Effective global cooperation is critical for our survival, but the challenge is to attain amidst the distrust and outdated structure that no longer reflect the current political and economic realities. So this unique opportunity aims to restore the trust and prove that international collaboration can successfully achieve shared goals and address emerging threats and opportunities. So in September, the world leader will meet at the United Nations in New York to adopt the Pact for the Future, which also include a global digital compact and also a declaration on future generations.
All right, when you talk of future generations, you also see the conflicts that are happening all across the world as we speak. So many, I don't want to go there. But these conflicts, on the one hand, not only have caused immense casualties, but have also caused a serious impact on inflation, on food prices in these different countries, Gaza, Sudan, Ukraine, and beyond. We have talked about the 120 million displaced people worldwide. How can the United Nations help? How can countries together on one platform through the SDGs help alleviate the serious impact of inflation on food prices?
I think this week, and also I know the goal 2 is under review. So the world leader will gather together to look for the solution. What's the issue on the food prices? We know that in 2022, the number of countries with food prices soaring, affected by abnormal high food prices, rose sharply in 2022 to reach a new high record of 58%. So in this week and also in the coming weeks, in the ministerial level, the segment of the high-level political, the world leaders will gather together to look for the solutions, to look at where the disruptions on the logistic and the food supply chains, how the work can work together to provide a stable food supply chain and to reduce the high food price and provide a sufficient, ensure the food security for the world.
Finally, Yongyi, Antonio Guterres, the United Nations Secretary General, had put up a huge introductory remark at the beginning of the UN SDG 2024 report that I happened to go through, and he talked about the same inequalities, the issues that concern, the positives also that have been put forward. But he also talks about bolder actions that are required, and he talks of 4 important points here. He says, firstly, we need peace. Secondly, we need solidarity. Thirdly, we need a surge in implementation. And he said also we need a more concerted effort to dismantle gender barriers and empower all the women and girls, because we cannot expect to achieve the goals without gender equality. So 4 things: peace, solidarity, implementation, and gender equality. With just 6 years remaining to implement the SDGs, because the end time period is 2030, do you feel these actions are achievable?
So let me say that we understand that we face enormous challenges like COVID-19 pandemic, climate impacts, and the geopolitical conflicts have set back progress in many years. And the developing country also facing enormous funding gaps. And also many of the SDG goals require complex systematic change that probably difficult to achieve rapidly. And given that, it's unlikely that all 17 goals will be fully achieved by 2030 in every country. However, we see significant progress is possible for many areas. the goals serve as a very important benchmarks and motivators, even if not all targets are met. So we have reason for hope and for optimism. There are growing global recognition of the SDG importance, and more people are aware of the importance of achieving and put the consolidated efforts to achieve it. We have a technological advancement. New technologies such as AI can enable a more efficient solution to some of the challenges. And partnership, I think there is increasing collaboration between governments, private sector, and the civil society in many areas to advance many of the developing goals. And also adaptive strategy. Many countries are developing innovative approach to accelerate progress. So moving forward, our focus should not be on if or not if we achieve the SDGs. The focus should be on making as much of the progress as possible by 2030, and also look at how we can continue and accelerate effort beyond 2030.
All right, thank you so very much, Yongyi, Chief of the SDG Monitoring Section at the UN Stats Division, to have joined us and to have talked to us exclusively on PTV World about the UN report on the SDGs in 2024, and of course all the inequalities, all the issues that the SDG report also points out, but also the good things that have also come out of it. But the important thing is that we get to know how the SDGs are being, taken care of by all the different countries. Are they being adapted properly? If not, what should be done and what are the lacunae that are present? And thank you for having highlighted all of that and given us a broader understanding of not only what your organization does, but also what the SDG report stands for. Thank you very much, Yongyi, to have joined us. That was, ladies and gentlemen, Yongyi, Chief of the Monitoring Section of the UN Stats Division, talking exclusively to PTV World. Next, ladies and gentlemen, let's talk about the IMF and the talks that the government is having with the IMF. There has been a media talk that has recently been done in which the Federal Minister for Finance, Mr. Mohammad Aurangzeb, seems very hopeful that talks with the IMF will yield a deal on the $6 billion extended fund facility, otherwise known as the AFF facility, this month. He also said that the government is going to subsequently request the lender to augment the package with a climate resilience facility. There was an in-camera meeting of the National Assembly Standing Committee on Finance and Revenue about the IMF negotiations, and after that the Finance Minister was talking to the journalists and highlighting some of the aspects of the progress that has been made in this respect. To talk more about this, we've been joined by Dr. Mahmood Khalid. He is a leading economist, joins us right here in the studios. Dr. Mahmood, thank you very much to have joined us. Welcome to our show again. It's always a pleasure talking to you. The Finance Minister Aurangzeb Saab says that the government has met almost all the prior actions and hopefully the new IMF program will be concluded this month. This is what he says. And he also has claimed completion of almost all the prior action before time and reaching an agreement in principle with all the provinces as well over the agricultural income tax. He also talks about the more than 6 billion EFF that he is very hopeful of getting from the IMF. Do you see the early completion of all what the Finance Minister has pointed out as a good omen for its relations with the IMF?
Definitely. Even before this completion of the preconditions, we had a very successful standby arrangement facility, because in the past, whenever we had interaction with the IMF, we never completed that arrangement.
I mean, I think the last one program and the one between 2013 and 16 were the only two programs that we completed successfully.
So from that perspective, we are already in terms of very good sort of working out with the IMF that what are they suggesting us to do in terms of our fiscal and the external account deficits, and we are complying with the requirements. So from that perspective, we are on the right path. So what the IMF has this time also added to it, that the resource collection should be increased. In this budget, we have seen that the revenue targets have been set close to 40% of the previous year's collection. At the same time, they have also suggested that the subsidies should be cut, especially on the tariff-related subsidies with the energy sector. So that has also been proposed. And you must have seen in the newspapers and other news reports that the Prime Minister is now offering protection to the lower user of the energy tariff. So that's a kind of a signal that in future you are going to see higher tariffs coming for the rest of the sectors, excluding the industrial sector. So that's a kind of a sign that whatever was the commitment with the IMF, that has been largely fulfilled. And just yesterday, the income tax from the agriculture was also agreed upon from the provinces. So we are hopeful that all the preconditions have been met. We are good in terms of the macro numbers. Our exchange rate has been stable. State Bank has been actually looking after the inflation targeting, and at the same time the fiscal deficit in terms of the overall economic activity as a percent of GDP has also been largely reduced.
And the stock exchange also is showing quite a positive activity since the last few weeks, or even, I mean, it had touched the 81,000 target, which had been unheard of in the past.
Exactly, and that's a kind of a sign that we are in the right direction. But the only issue is that how long we are going to persist on that, because in the past what has happened, that we gradually pick up the momentum, the policies are set in the right direction, and then suddenly the policies are reversed for political reasons, one or other, and at the same time momentum also starts crumbling.
So it all depends on how these policies are implemented and the continuity of the implementation of these policies. The government has also subsequently requested IMF to augment the package with a climate resilient facility. This is the first time I'm hearing of it, so I'd like to understand a little bit. The minister, while replying to a question, said that the EFF size had not yet been finalized. He said once in place, the government will approach the IMF staff with its augmentation with the CRF facility on the eve of the first quarterly review that will happen of the IMF. He also said that the financing did not come up during the ongoing discussions on the EFF. This CRF is a relatively new facility. Tell us a little bit about the CRF, because like myself, I'm sure a lot of people don't know about it. Secondly, how important is it for Pakistan as an addition to the new EFF?
Well, if you look at the fiscal side of the government, it comprises of the recurrent budget, the development budget. But over the past, what has happened is that since the natural disasters were regularly occurring, so it was a kind of a risk towards the overall objectives of the budget and the growth sector. So what we have seen in the past is that on an average, every year the government has to actually support for the relief, rehabilitation, as well as some sort of a recovery which has to be made. So this year, the outgoing fiscal year, the IMF actually requested the Ministry of Finance to come out with a report which was based on the risk element related to the climate side. And they have actually put out that what is the cost which the fiscal side has to bear in case there is a disaster. So what happens is that when we talk about the natural disasters, there is a kind of a modeling in which we try to predict that on an average what is going to be the likely impact in the coming years. So if there is no fund facility available for that, in case of the disaster, then the government has to actually take out resources from other sectors.
Of course, as it's done in the past.
Exactly. So this is what the government and the IMF in terms of the global provision have set up a fund in which such kinds of provisionings are going to be made to those countries which are facing these climate related disasters. So if we had very good capital markets working, we know that the government's budget deficit is also financed from the same capital markets, leaving very less room for the private sector. So in order to protect the overall business environment in terms of availability of the funds, we need to have resources coming outside the system. And this time the government has actually requested the IMF to please augment our resources with that climate resilience fund facility. And that is based on that report which they have produced on the fiscal risk, that this is the cost which on average the government has to bear every year.
All right. So, Dr. Mahmood, how much of a possibility is there of the CRF facility being accepted by the IMF? A. Secondly, how much is expected that the IMF will augment the EFF with this CRF facility?
Well, normally what happens is that we don't get the CRF facility for the budgetary purposes.
Okay.
It's a kind
it's
of
only
a fund.
in case.
It's a contingent fund. In case, God forbid, the natural disasters happen, then the amount is going to be utilized.
All right.
That is also called in Pakistan as the National Disaster Management Risk Fund. So what is going to happen is that the CRF fund facility, if it comes through, is going to be parked in that fund. And in case of the disaster, or to an extent the mitigation efforts are going to be met. So when the minister says that they are going to ask for augmentation, it's not going to be for budgetary purposes, it's not going to be for purely the balance of payment issues, it is going to be cover for that risk element which normally is happening to our fiscal side. Now the amount depends, because if you look at the cost which they have projected, that's huge, because that goes close to $29 billion, what they have estimated that this is the government support which has to be provided either in terms of the relief rescue as well as rebuilding the infrastructure which actually is swept with the natural disasters.
All right.
I am not sure that they are going to provide, because if you look at the total size of the fund, that's not that much. Plus there
it's
are
around 50 billion, if
yes,
I'm not wrong.
around 60 billion. And there are many other countries which are also prone to climate change related disasters. So they would also be looking forward for such facilities from them. But at the same time, if we get that facility, so that is going to put us with some kind of a cushion that in case a disaster happens, then it's not going to affect our regular budgetary allocations which we normally do.
All right, Dr. Mahmood, another thing that seemed a bit new to me, because I hadn't heard about it in quite a number of years, is the income tax on agriculture. Now, on the one hand, our finance minister just did say that he has talked to the provinces, they are in agreement with it, in principle, over the income tax on agriculture, but of course it is a provincial subject, so the process could not be completed, he said, without detailed consultations with them as well. This income tax on agriculture has not been taken for quite a number of years in the past. How do you see this addition? How do you feel it is going to help our economy? And how compliant do you feel the provinces would be or could be as far as this income tax on agriculture is concerned?
If you allow me to be very candid on this, we are still thinking that it's a pipeline kind of dream, because normally what happens is that on the fiscal side, the tax burden is in proportion to the government expenditure. So since the agriculture is primarily the provincial subject, so that is why the income from the agriculture was also asked from the provinces to collect as a tax. Now what has happened in the past is that because of the political economy of this agriculture income tax, it has never been levied at the provincial stage. Even when the FBR was requesting the provinces that let us collect it on your behalf, the provinces has not paid heed to it. Now if you go into the practicalities of the thing, normally what happens is that when you are going to collect the income tax, the first thing is that you have to assess the income. In Pakistan, the problem has been that nobody is willing to reveal their true income, or at least they have many ifs and buts behind that particular income source. You must have heard about the salaried class claiming that we are being taxed so much because they cannot hide their income. That's a sum total which everybody gets as a salary. But as a business, as a agriculture producer, I can always say that sorry, I couldn't earn this much, or I purchased this much amount of the inputs towards my receipts which I have collected as turnover. So what we think, you must have seen it in the social media and others, that Punjab government has requested the FBR to collect on their behalf. That's not practical, because the mechanism is still with the provincial governments. I'll give you a quick example. Now there is a agriculture crop reporting system which is in the provinces, which collects a smaller tax called as Abhiana, or the water use charges. So the person from that department goes to each farmer who's sowing that particular their crop, and they are going to charge it accordingly. So if it's a commercial crop or a cash crop, then the rate would be different. If it is a staple food, then the rate would be different. So the person sitting in the province already knows that what kind of a crop is going to be sown, what is their likely production. At the same time, the subsidies on fertilizers is also provided by the provinces. The inputs are also provided by the seed companies which are licensed by the provinces. So they know all the mechanism, that what is the turnover and what is the cost in terms of the input.
In your point of view, it's easier for the provinces to take care of the income tax on agriculture.
So simply asking the FBR is not going to solve the problem, because FBR is unable to even collect the regular income tax from the non-salaried class. You have seen that the withholding taxes have risen. They have asked so many new businesses to collect withholding. The only reason is that the people are not reflecting their true incomes. So they have to look for some other ways.
Do you feel the mechanism could be implemented through which everybody could reflect their true income? Is that a possibility in the near future?
Yes, the possibility is that we have to think about a kind of a benefit system towards payment of taxes, one. And we have to delegate the responsibilities of certain taxes to the places where it is actually most beneficial in terms of expenditures. It's a kind of a local ownership which is required for even tax collection.
All right.
The debate is going to be extended. Actually, the problem's solution lies in the NFC formula.
Okay.
In which if we can create some incentives for the provinces to help collect the FBR resources so that they can be paid out of that, that is the only solution where the true incomes can be revealed.
All right.
Because at the bottom, normally the people know.
All right. The finance minister also said the following. There are different statements. I'd like your point of view on that. He has agreed that inflation was expected to increase slightly, but he said there is still room for reduction in the policy rate of the state bank, although he says normally the state banks take some time to reduce their policy rate. He said central banks around the world did not, this is what I've just said. He said macroeconomic indicators had improved in recent months and the IMF program had helped restore financing from other multilaterals, as was evident from the recent approvals by the Dasu Dam of the Dasu Dam by the World Bank as well. He said nothing has been controlled artificially, there is no restriction on imports and all assumptions about devaluation have died down. He also says that tax has been imposed on real estate as well as developers, retailers, and pressure was being mounted from all segments as everyone wanted to stay away from the tax net. This is a huge point that then will need to be catered to. How will these measures further our relationship with the IMF or create issues with in this relationship? How do you see all these points that I've just mentioned?
Well, actually, as a policy statement, these are very good and valid points, because the real estate has not been contributing their due share. So if IMF or no IMF, so that's the kind of an equity principle in taxation. Everybody should be paying their due share.
True.
So from that perspective, it's good. Now from the IMF perspective, as I mentioned earlier, they are actually looking towards macro stabilization. So from that perspective, the inflation has come down from a higher of 38% to the last months it was close to 11%. Exchange rate has been stabilized. The fluctuations which used to happen earlier is not happening. Our economy is also rebounding, although it is not the good in terms of the large scale manufacturing and others, but still it is coming on its foot. So from that perspective, the things are looking towards that we have actually passed stage 1 in which the stabilization is achieved to an extent. Now in the next stage, we have to think about how our policies are going to affect the future. And we have been talking about this in this show and other programs, that the government needs to improve its regulatory regime, and for that the government has actually enacted a new department. We have been saying that out of the 47 regulatory departments of the federal government, you should actually reduce the number of regulations and maybe merge them. They have actually created a new department which is going to look into the regulatory maps of all these and suggest that how they are going to reduce it, but still it's good, because if
step
we
in
get
the right direction.
Yes, because if we get some kind of an ease in doing business and the cost of the doing business improves, then likely the investment is going to come. So from that perspective is good. From the monetary policy side, the minister is right, but what happens is that generally the state banks don't look at the monthly inflation, they look at the yearly inflation. For the last fiscal year, we had an inflation of around 23%. Our policy rate was 22. The basic principle is that our policy rate would be close to the inflation rate, so that the real interest rate remains close to 0 or somewhat positive. So what we are expecting, that if the inflation persists in the same manner at a lower band, then likely the state bank is going to reduce.
All right. So and the he's saying that there is no restriction on imports and all assumptions about devaluation have died down. That is also, I think,
that's a positive sign, because our exports actually rely on imported raw materials. In the last government, we had regulatory duties and additional duties which were specifically to reduce the import bill, but unfortunately that has also affected our exports. So we need to open up so that we can again move back to our good exports.
Last question, I need a short answer. Mr. Aurangzeb says the IMF has asked for eliminating presumptive tax and he says the tax on exporters was introduced because of that reason. He said exporters are worried, but we also have our own compulsions. But he says all tax refunds were being paid to exporters and more than 260 billion rupees had been cleared so far. Is the elimination of presumptive tax and this imposition of tax on exporters a step in the right direction?
Exactly, because this is how we can improve our tax policy. When you are doing taxation on presumptive basis, you are either under-taxing or you are over-taxing. So by asking the exporters to come under the normal income tax regime, one, we would know that what's their actual income. therefore they cannot hide their receipts or they cannot under or over invoice, because what is happening now is that they tend to over invoice their exports just to show that we have sold more, and they were not declaring their income. So once we get them on the normal income tax regime, they would be actually bringing back their export receipts. But on top of that, what has happened is that because of the technology, now we can actually provide them the required input adjustments which were not provided in the presumptive regime. So that problem has also been solved, because the exporters were used to saying that we are not getting that input adjustments which the other businesses which are doing domestic business are getting. So once having the normal tax regime with all kinds of input tax adjustments is the right step, and it should not just be exporters, it should be all across the businesses.
But at least it's, I mean, it's a beginning, it's a good beginning.
Yes,
and I
totally
think the steps that have been taken, I hope they reap the benefit. And as you said, the important thing is the continuity of the policies that have been put forward by the current government. Thank you so very much, Dr. Mahmood, Khalid, leading economist, to have joined us, to have talked to us about our relationship with the IMF, the recent statements that have been made by the finance minister, and what impact they are going to have on our economy. I think things are moving in the right direction, but we need continuity. I think the key point here to note is continuity of all these policies that have been announced.
Exactly.
Thank you very much, Mahmood, Khalid, who have joined us. Let's come to our last two stories. And the first concerns 65 pilot whales who have died in a Scottish mass stranding. Now, these have passed away or died after being stranded on an island off the north coast of Scotland. This has been stated by a rescue charity yesterday. On the arrival, the medics found there to be 77 animals high up on the beach. They had been stranded for several hours already, but only 12 of them were alive at this point, which means that 65 had gone away. Now, the whales can get stranded on shore for a range of reasons, such as when they lose their way, they get trapped by tides. But scientists say there is no single definitive reason behind the phenomenon, which has been recorded throughout history. They also have very close social bonds, and that is why they move in a lot of pairs, and that is why when somebody gets stranded, the others follow them as well. Now, almost a year ago, a similar event had also happened involving pilot whales that occurred on Lewis and the Scottish island. A mass stranding event also occurred in the Western Australian region earlier this year as well. So these are things that happen, but nevertheless, this also shows the bonding between the pilot whales. Rather, finally, ladies and gentlemen, a nearby exoplanet has been discovered that could be the first known ocean world, which means there could be life there, which means also that a lot of people are going to point towards the theory of aliens. Anyways, a planet relatively close to Earth could be the first ever detected with a potentially life-sustaining liquid ocean outside of our solar system, according to scientists that have used the James Webb Scientific Telescope. And the James Webb Scientific, what a discovery, and what new things it has really made us discover since the last few years. Now, more than 5,000 planets have been discovered out of the solar system so far, but this exoplanet, which is known as LHS 1140, is one of the few in this habitable zone and has been thoroughly scrutinized since it was first discovered in 2017. It is 48 light years away from us, which is a huge distance for the moment, but we never know what kind of transport we might have in the coming future. It equates to more than 450 trillion kilometers, relatively close in the vast distance of space as well. This exoplanet has been thought to be a small gas planet called a mini Neptune, but new observations from the telescope has confirmed that this exoplanet is in fact a rocky super Earth, quote unquote. It is 1.7 times bigger than the Earth and has 5.6 times larger mass than the Earth. And also it contains hydrogen. There were no signs of hydrogen or helium, but there are signs of nitrogen, which is also another element that is present abundantly on this Earth. So discovery, you never know, what the coming years might show. Maybe some kind of life also residing in that exoplanet as well. With that, ladies and gentlemen, and with that wonderful discovery, we end today's show. It is Friday, so we'll inshallah see you after a little bit of a hiatus on Monday. Have a wonderful weekend. See you soon on Monday with stories that pertain to you, us and Pakistan. Allah Hafiz.